Dope. All right. So it's three major tenets to our podcast today. So we're gonna speak to the teachers, we're gonna speak to the parents, and we're gonna speak to administrators, right? So we're gonna start it off with, I feel like it should be an honor to teach in underserved communities. How do you fellas feel?
Well, yeah, we agree with that. Raise your hand if you think it's an honor to teach where you teach at, and serve where you serve. And one of the things that I think that we should also say, if folks are live streaming to Facebook or whatever, tag us. I think that this conversation has always been so insular, and the narrative out there is that people are like those kids should be lucky to have whoever, right? We should be lucky to be doing that work with our kids. And they should see a room of black educators that's taking pride in that. It's not a burden, it's what we chose to do, it's your vocation, right? It's what your calling is. And so we need to start getting these messages out there because there's so many people that don't look like us and don't live like us that's dictating the narrative, that's making and painting our children as needy or bad or stupid or whatever the case is. We need those kids just as much as they need us. So, share that and be proud of what you do. So I definitely think that it's an honor and a privilege. And I think that for folks in here, and we're going to say it's charter school people that's in here, that's important because often those folks will, everybody raise their hand when you say, the educators in the room? But you start talking about charter and some of them hands go down. You know what I'm saying? If it's a privilege, treat it like it's a privilege, you know what I'm saying? And be proud of what you do. You only should be ducking if you don't think you're good at what you do. Now, if you whack, let's have a different conversation. But if you raw, if you that work, put it out there and let these folks know.
Even if the governor is coming at your throat, still stand tall. You're doing work for children, and he's so far removed. People like that who have been so far removed from the proximity of being around black children and the struggles and the pain, as well as the joy and the success. They're so far removed, so it's easy to be in Harrisburg and say, well, this is what I want to do, or be in York and say, this is what I want to do, and not really be affiliated with the student. And I agree with the governor on a whole lot of things. But whenever you say, hey, I want to hold this group accountable, hold everybody accountable. That should be the conversation of a governor of an entire commonwealth. Not that's the group, because what you say, when you say that, you imply that everyone else is already doing right. As soon as you say that group, that small percentage, right? Not 70% of the schools, not 50% of the schools, this smaller percentage of charter schools, and you say, I'm going to hold that group accountable. If that's the last thing I do, you automatically give other people. Because that first question, some people showed up because it's a job, right? Not here. This is a space that that folks are committed to black learning. There are a whole lot of folks who say that's a job that I can do, even if it's a job they can't do. They still think I can do that, and you see it in how they teach. You see it in how they plan. You see it in how they talk about black children, about Latino children, about poor children, because that's not their world. We got folks who parachute into schools and rocket ship out. For real? All right. The black audience, yeah, you're like, no, I'm real elementary. We got educators who will parachute into our schools and rocket ship out. They can't wait to get out. They'll run kids over on their way out, right? And so, this idea of connecting education and liberation, this idea of saying, you know what, it's an honor for me to be here because every time, there's a saying, children don't inherit the earth from us. We borrow it from them. So if we approach our work as if we have actually borrowed this earth, this land, this community from our children, from the next generation and generations after, we'll approach it with a sense of urgency and a sense of political thought. Because we understand the history of what's happened to our community, and we understand what needs to happen for it to go forward and successful.
Sharif be on his bye-bye vibes, right? He be like,
every time she talks straight from Kinshasa,
every time we talk, it's like just wisdom just pours out. Man. That's what I like to stop it.
You just see the tweets he be sending me. I mean the text. Yo, man, be quiet. What you talking about?
No, we don't. See? Go ahead, brother. Don't go turn this crowd on me.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, my first on that last point, every time I sit next to Sharif, I look like a Negro peeing. I didn't want to call it out because I think I'm thinking it. So I want to call it out. AD and BC, the Great Passage. So listen, I think all this sounds good. I like to tell people I'm not an educator, formally trained or any of that. I'm a parent. And that's the way I show up in these rooms. I've been a parent activist for years. I've been a parent activist since my firstborn 28 years ago and felt like I was fighting the system. So this all sounds good, that it should be a privilege to treat our children, or teach our children and all that. But my experience as a student, as an adult, as a parent, whatnot, is I don't believe it. Right? If anybody loves or wants to liberate our kids, I don't know about it. Like, I don't feel it. And I've got like 30 years of experience with public schools, right? And actually a charter and a private school. So if anybody loves our children, I don't know about it yet, right? I'm waiting for it to get to me. And when it comes to educators, I want to tell you, it's pretty insulting the way that I listen to the narrative. When I hear people talk about our kids, so let me just say this. Every morning, parents are opening. Every morning, parents are opening their car door, and letting their kid out, and they're sending off a kid that they think is funny and gregarious and silly and does crazy things and blah blah blah, and brilliant and all this. And that kid, 8 million of them are walking into buildings where the narrative about them coming out of educators' mouths about them is an awfulizing narrative, awfulizing everything about them. Right? They're no longer funny, gregarious, happy, brilliant, whatever children. Suddenly they're deficit. Our children are not stupid. They pick up what adults think and say about them, right? So they are not dumb people. As a matter of fact, they're smarter oftentimes than the people that are serving them are, because they've already watched you and they know game when they see it, right? So this sounds good that it should be a privilege, but it's not right now, right? Our kids get some of the worst teachers in the country on purpose, not by accident, right? Some of the teachers that they get are lesser paid because of who they're serving, oftentimes, right? Not by accident. The system is rigged from the top to the bottom. And the only thing that our children represent to most of the people in the education system, in my point of view, is a per pupil income, right? I had a doctor in Seattle tell me, Chris, our children are the most studied and the least taught of all children. And that was jarring to me, because here I'm a parent. We are entrusting the system, our children. Every morning we're turning, and it's not a good deal. Honestly, it's not a good deal. We are turning 8 million black children over every morning to people that don't love them, to systems that weren't made for them, to classrooms that don't know how to teach them, and if they do know how to teach them, they're not on the hook for actually doing it, right? That's the arrangement we have right now between me, the parent, and the system and the educators. So it sounds good, and I'm loving that you are all here this morning. This is the happy part of our podcast. I always like to say that. This is the happy part. This is the best thing to say. But that's how I feel about this as a parent.
So parents, often overlooked, definitely undervalued. Cole, one of your main mantras, bro, is you say parents are on their own. So let's dig into that concept. What does that mean to you?
It means parents are on their own. I think parents, black kids, people, neighborhoods, communities, black teachers, I just think you're on your own. I think it's a lot of people. Listen, there's a lot of folks that play a lot of lip service and say the right things, right? I often say when we have these conversations, I'll say, you want a right answer or the real answer? I think a lot of people know the right answers, right? They know the social justice stuff, they know how to say stuff to get snaps and all that stuff. But the real answer is, your ass is on your own. And when we look at like the level of failure that happens in our school, not that our kids are failing, but that we are failing kids. And when you become the bad guy for actually calling out and saying, I want good teachers for my kids, and I want some type of measure to let me know that you're actually doing well.
Your teacher bashing.
Oh, you know, right? Like, right? And it's like, yo, we live in a time where we have put like the needs of adults that are gonna be okay over kids that can't read. It's almost like when you watching TV and you know that like white people care about dogs more than they care about black people. So when we have these conversations, and that's why I love this hashtag and where y'all have kind of started this, how are the kids doing? Like, you can bash me, you can say all this stuff, you can call me a cracker, Uncle Tom, or whatever you want to say, and blah, 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 this, that, and the third. You might be better at Twitter than me and all that stuff, but just know that you mad because I'm asking you how the kids in your classroom are doing. You pontificating on Twitter, baby, you done risk some stuff. I hate this, I don't like this, I don't like these teachers or whatever the case is. And that's just a problem, man. And I just feel like if it's really about kids, then we should humble thyself, you know what I'm saying, and be like, look, none of us is doing as great as we can be doing, but damn it, like, y'all marching in the street and Red for Ed and all this stuff, and it's a whole bunch of white folks and it's a whole bunch of black folks holding up a profession that is littered with white folks in our kids, and when we ask them how these kids are doing and can we measure something, you the devil. Somehow. How did that narrative...
Charles, pause. Stay right there. If you're driving a red Subaru Outback license HVJ3505, you need to move ASAP, you're gonna get towed.
Why can't everybody look to see who ran outside?
We are here for you.
I'll go through those. It's hot here, like church, you can say, and dinner ran out of fish.
I thought somebody was...
We got hot dogs.
Pray for Mother Jackson. She's on the sick and shut in.
Pray for Mama, she got the sugars.
But that was a perfect segue. The Subaru, you know what I'm saying?
But I did thought he was trying to give me somebody's number.
No, it's all, of course, that's exactly where you went. That's what's up. But that's just the general point, right? Like, listen to how people talk about these kids, right? When we had these conversations about education and who's doing what, like, that's how you know you are in this by yourself. And you need to let your parents know, like, look, I'm gonna do my best to love your kid, I'm gonna do the best job I can, and we need to work together. But I just really need you to know that the people that proclaim to love your kids are good at saying it, but not really good at doing it. And so let me prepare you to make sure you're successful, because I'm not gonna be with you all the time and I might fail you. Like, if we really love kids, we gotta be honest with people and say, look, I love your baby, I might be struggling to teach your baby, but here's some things you can do. So that's how, when I believe it when I say we are on our own in this work.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those interesting things. I didn't experience public school until, people talk about like school choice, like it's a new thing. Black folks been choosing school, whether it was the woods right outside the plantation, whether it was, in someone's basement, under someone's porch. Like, we've been choosing how to educate in different avenues for our children forever. And so, but there's this narrative right now that, when you talk about like parents are on their own, that some people, and it's just a wake-up call for everybody, especially parents, like, this entire system, right? America was built in a manure of racism and oppression, right? Like, so if we can acknowledge that, that means that every system that grew out of that, that fertile ground of manure that produces racism, it was built on that. Like, that's what the brick and mortar is. And so when we have schools that were originally started to marginalize one group and elevate another, right? Like, that's what it's for. If you read the history of black education in the South, he talks about that poor white folks was not interested in public education at all. And I'm not talking about for black people. They're talking for their own children. They weren't interested. Because they thought, hey, you know what? Farming is the way to go. The rich white folks, the planners, they didn't care about public education because they do the same thing they do now. They got private tutors, right? So they were going the private route, and then somebody would come to their house and educate their, their children. They didn't care about the poor folks. They didn't care about the black folks, definitely. There were black folks who said, you know what? Nah. You know what? Dr. Howard Fuller talks about they were liberated but not free. Right? And so their shackles were off, but they weren't free, right? It moved to sharecropping, it moved to other things. They weren't actually free. Free means self-determination, right? Like, you're determining things. Black people say, no, we're going to get education because that's tied to this liberation piece. We got to know how to read. And so it wasn't until white folks started seeing black people become illiterate. You're talking about from 95% illiterate to 70, 80% literate. As they were seeing that, they're like, oh no, why didn't they got books? Why they got, I forgot to say the N-word.
There's no such thing as an N-word.
It means the same thing.
It don't really mean the same thing. With the letters back in it. We never discussed this. We never said it's gonna be the N-word from now on. I don't know where that came from.
As I said, I didn't go to public school until I got to high school. So that word wasn't just used at, anywhere. Maybe somebody's basement on Richard Pryor's records. But nobody in
Red Fox.
Red Fox, that's what it was. But anyway, that's when they said, hey, we need public education. Because they started seeing black children, even if they didn't have a school, they were on some like porch and stuff, they said, oh, we have to do this. So again, it wasn't to support like, oh, we're gonna, emancipation and we're gonna provide school, 40 acres of mule and education. That wasn't the case. But some kind of way, there's too many black parents that trust this part of the system. They won't trust the hospitals. They won't trust the police, the courts, but for some reason think that they have a romanticized view of education. And we all went to school. Like that's the part that I'm confused about. You experience, it's not something that is just like, oh, yes, you experience the oppression that your child is experiencing. And the last piece I would say about this, Pennsylvania, 96% of the teachers are white. Folks can say what they want, 96% of white people do not love black kids.
Nationwide is 80%.
Yeah, nationwide, Pennsylvania is tied with Minnesota, 96%. And so my conversation of black children all the time at the Center for Black Educated Development, we're like trying to recruit, support, at the Fellowship Black Male Educators for Social Justice, we're trying to recruit, support black children and saying, we're going to auditoriums, the Why I Teach tour, and these black children saying, why the hell would I consider becoming a teacher? President coined it as, what they're really saying is, why would I come back to the scene of a crime against myself?
Bro, you're not gonna be shouting out Chris Emden on our show.
Look, brother. The brother said,
You just spewing hate, bro. You just hate. Oh, wait. Ray gonna be right.
Call it response.
Ray gonna rap. Y'all some haters, bro. We're not gonna do that. That brother works hard. That's a dope brother, man.
listen,
Keep going, man.
But the bottom line is what we tell our children is consider becoming the teachers that you wish you had and knew you needed. Because you may not come back, but your little brother and sister are still in there. We need vanguards. So y'all better, as we're building our own, you better flood this damn system and protect these children, empower the children.
So I just, I need to interject a couple of points that I think might be provocative. Number one,
More?
yeah.
Can you talk to the microphone, bro? You giving all the sound people a heart attack.
You're a little bossy this morning.
No, the brother is trying to say, talking to the mic, man.
Okay, all right. So number one, it ain't just white teachers.
So wait.
I'm not. There's a lot of self-hatred in this world. And some of it walks into our classrooms every day. So I just want to be real clear about the fact there's some great white teachers and there's some trash black teachers. So, and if y'all, if you are not willing to tell the truth about your own colleagues, I don't trust you. Because there is a way in which you can join a system and become it, right? So when you enter a system as a teacher, you got like two paths. There's a door one and a door two. And the door one is you go in that door to become somebody who transforms the system. The door two, you become transformed by the system, right? So you only got two doors you can walk through. And white, Mexican, Puerto Rican, whatever, you can walk through any one of those doors, right? And as a parent on the outside, as the consumer, I'm gonna be watching all of it, right? I'm not gonna just think just because you look like me or, we share something in common that I'm automatically gonna trust. You still work for the system.
I ain't never seen no Uncle Ruckus in the public school.
Right? And I mean, at the end of the day, let's just be clear. If you study history, you still work for the state. I might like you. You might be my cousin or whatnot, but you get your marching orders from the state. So let's just be real about that. Number two, it ain't just teachers. I go from city to city to city and see a repeating story about the neglect and the lack of care about children of color and black children specifically, right? And that is not a problem with just a classroom. Entire cities are not on the hook for the welfare of children. If I go to any city, I can name 10 right now, the mayor isn't on the hook, the city council isn't on the hook, the dog catcher is on the hook. No one is on the hook for black children or brown children in any city in this country. So to put it all on teachers and all in the classrooms, this is what I would say. We all should know our role. My role as a parent is I'm supposed to show up, I'm supposed to support you with my child, right? We're supposed to be a team. right? There's supposed to be like this relationship. If I fall down on the job, tell me. I'm good with it too. If you fall down on the job, don't be angry when I tell you about that either. We all have a role to play. But it ain't just schools and classrooms. I just want to be real about this. There should not be a mayor in America who can stand up and say, I lead a world-class city where no one can read. Right? There should not be a mayor in America who can win an election without ever having to touch an education question. Right? Right? That is some nonsense. And here's the worst part to me. I know your numbers are going to be bad. I expect that before I get there to you. But do you have a plan? And are you on the hook for that plan? And does the public know what that plan is? And are you being monitored to see if you're making progress against that plan? The worst crime for me the worst crime is not just to have the bad numbers, it's to not have a plan. Right? And for the community not to demand one is crazy.
Right.
I love that. All right, so I've been given another note. Before I get to the other note, I'm gonna go to one more question. Right.
Somebody's getting told?
No.
Okay.
You can tell them now.
We're getting told.
Gotcha.
All right. So they police our bodies, they police our hairstyles. Reef, you're the administrator on the panel. How can we help administrators free our kids' minds?
First, they gotta free their own minds, right? So this idea, like, when Chris talks about, and people give Stewart a whole lot of, crap, because of his role. 3 of us are parents, and so anytime I'm,
It's those 3.
yeah.
And we got a lot of kids too.
They got hella kids.
Like,
This is 3, and I don't want none.
We got something you can borrow though.
Most definitely. And so, when we talk about, and so they give him crap. But we're talking about, like, as parents, because they're like, you work this, you got this, you funded for this, Mother got children. So he sees this from multiple angles. They act like, everybody has intersections except, educators. He's educators. Pennsylvania, just like every other state, most teachers don't put their kids in any school that's similar to the one they work in. Forget the one they work in, not even one similar. Philadelphia, almost half of the teachers put their kids in private schools. Absolute private. They're like, forget this system. And I look like I do this and I do that and we all do this and we're all wearing red. Why don't you put your kids in front of those folks that you marching with in red?
Well,
Nah, you ain't doing that.
I mean, think about what that means though, right? Like you go to a restaurant, you like ask your waiter or waitress, what do you recommend? I don't know, I don't eat this. I don't even tell you. You know you're hungry that way. I smelled some of it. I don't eat this one.
Yeah, so when you talk about like administrators, there's certain things throughout my career. So I was in the school for 26 years, my last 16 as the principal. My first year as a principal, other principals said, number one thing, young man, keep your head down and don't say nothing. These were from elder statesmen in the district. And I was just like, and I just wasn't raised that way. I mean, I'm not loud and boisterous, but I'm gonna say what I need to say, right? Like we couldn't come home for dinner if we weren't like saying what needed to be said. You know what I mean? That's just how we were raised, right? And so, but to have our elders, and then only thing I could think of was like that's survival and fear, right? But if you're thinking survival and fear, how are you returning the earth and the community that you borrowed back to children? You're not set up that way because you're thinking of one particular way. As a leader, as an educator, because when you're a teacher, you're leading a classroom. If you're an administrator, you're leading a school. Throughout of it, families are like as leaders, if you're not approaching this work as political, if you're trying to separate and say, no, this is just, I just love children, then go to the library and do story reading. In the school, you gotta come to fight for those who have been marginalized and kicked and spat on and just disrespected from the very time they entered. Anytime we can, you think about that all that data that goes out about how many times a 4-year-old in black communities, Latino communities, poor communities have been suspended or expelled. If I'm a 4-year-old and you've already told me you don't belong here, and don't get me wrong, that don't mean I want anybody biting my 3-year-old daughter. That ain't what I'm saying, right? But when they're acting, you know, in a way that you find challenging, and you just like, you know what, we can't service your child here. Forget the conversation itself, think about the psyche of that child. And by the time they get to you in first grade, and you think like, you know, what's happened to you? Most people just say, what's wrong with you? But even if you're thinking, what happened to you? Like, the kid can't even communicate the levels of hatred that they experience as being a black child in America's schools. And forget what you said, and I agree with you. It ain't anti-blackness is not just, that's, you know, white folks don't own that.
Poor Ray. Ray, you gonna make Ray cut you off, Ray. I know you was a
Oh,
good
my
answer.
bad.
It's hard, ain't it? It's hard though, it's an ain't.
It's definitely
Cause he be going.
one of the most difficult things in the world to host you on. Yeah. But so we talked in the beginning of the show about goals. We wanted to talk to the teachers, we wanted to talk to the parents, we want to talk to the administrators. I feel like we've done that. So the independent practice portion of our podcast is over. Now we're gonna move into the guided practice in which we ask you guys ask questions, we give answers. So how are the children? So we're gonna set some ground rules. Chris, set the ground rules on the questions because you know how people like to testify.
I mean, the question is a thing with a question mark at the end. It is not your business plan, your resume, the idea you've been waiting to share for 15 years, something you heard or read on CNN this morning. The question's a question, that's it. That's the only ground rule.
So no declarative statements, only interrogative.
Unless you are a pastor, of which my arms are too short to box with God. I just want to say that right now. Teachers, I will cut you off. Pastors, have at it.
All right, so if you're a clergy, please.
And deacons, Kerr. Mark Kerr, my college roommate up in the house. Nick, IUP up in this joint.
Y'all taking these people's question time, brother.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So, question. Do we have a microphone to get?
They can take mine if they need to.
Yeah, take his.
Yeah, it's good.
He ain't got no kids. Take his.
I sure don't. I don't. Y'all some fertile Negroes. Let's talk about it. Why y'all got so many kids? Why y'all got so many kids? Are you tilling them all?
First,
I wanted 10. I didn't.
You wanted 10.
As a child, I wanted 10.
You know, I always forget how old you are. Like, I be like, we be. So, anyway, man.
And
But
sometimes your wife just keeps getting pregnant.
So wait. Before we move on, I want to distinguish the fact that they have a lot of kids. I got a couple.
yeah. Where's the first question?
We're just going to take questions.
Okay.
You can hear me right now.
We'll repeat the question since it's recorded.
Thank you, sir.
Where's the first question now?
Right here. Hi.
Hi.
Chris, you had said that you knew that teachers did not love your kids. So I'm wondering, what tell signs, or what were you looking for to know that teachers loved your child or your children?
Good question.
That's a good question. So the question is, that's a good question. You got a question mark at the end and everything. The question was, what did I see in teachers that let me know that they either did or didn't love my child? And it's a hard question because, like, we're many teachers don't know this, but when you have multiple kids, you go through lots of teachers over a period of time. So you get to start seeing trends and patterns. And there's sometimes right in the beginning, you just look at it and you go, oh yeah, this is gonna be one of those years with one of those teachers. The teachers that I think have been the strongest are the ones that give us like really good, honest feedback that we can trust and let us know that they are actually watching our child for the good and the bad, right? Like they give you a mix of information that lets you know this isn't about just somebody clamping down on your child all the time. I mean, I had one teacher who talked about one of my sons. She stopped me in the hallway and she said, he didn't go to regular preschool, did he? I said, no, he stayed at home with his mom. I mean, like, you know, blah, blah, whatever. She said, yeah, I can tell. He's like always lethargic in the morning. And we're lethargic. Like, I'm looking at somebody and I'm like thinking to myself of all the things that you could say about one of my sharpest, brightest, happiest kids. Like, that word just rang out to me in the way that she said it, and she turns instantly after she said it, like it was a done conversation. I'm standing in the hallway feeling good. I'm a black father, you're a white woman teaching my child, we're having this conversation. There's a lot of history between those two people meeting in the hallway. So you better watch your word choice when you talk about my brilliant son, right? And asking dumb questions like he didn't go to preschool. My child is mannerable, smart, sharp, all those things. Lethargic is nothing, is never even be close to what he is. We had a problem for the rest of the year. The rest of the year, I'm watching him now. It might not seem fair, but it's what happens.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. That was a great question. That was a great question.
Next question?
Max, no question?
Hands up or something?
Who's next?
It's a question over in the, it's a brother in the back.
Okay, I'm just the artist. Okay,
Don't say just before you speak your piece, bro. You ain't just an artist, you're an artist.
You're doing a damn good job over there.
I graduated from George Westinghouse, class of 2007. And when I graduated, I went into, every day when I went to school, I didn't go thinking about what teachers love me or not. I went thinking about, I need to learn my education, and these teachers is not going to help me as much as I want to help myself. So they can tell me that we're taking a quiz, but if I don't go home and go study, and I come up with a bad report card, and my mom's like, hey, what happened? I wasn't studying. So it's not that they didn't love me, but how much do I love my future? How much do I want to be educated? We can't make excuses on certain people that they were taught to be this way. I come from Homewood. You know, it's a hard place to be from, but I'm successful standing in front of you today, and I graduated from high school. So it didn't take education for me to be successful. It took bravery, it took consistency, and it took resilience. And that's why I'm standing here today.
Yeah.
So wait. What was your question?
It's all good.
I don't want the whole thing with, I don't want people to think if you don't have education, you won't be successful.
I get what you're saying.
This is an education forum. I still want a question.
We got it, right? Let him go.
I think so. Two things. One, I applaud you for your hard work.
Yeah.
And I would say, education did, because whether you got it from your teachers or not, someone was educated.
But Chris, this is what
What you're saying was schooling
right.
did not push you forward. But your community, your family, the fact that you brought up your mom as part of your accountability measure helped you with a sense of purpose. That's education, bro. That's education.
Well, my mom had Yeah, my mom been a bartender her whole life.
I hear you.
You know, if somebody mentioned 10 kids, I'm one of those 10.
I hear
I'm
you.
the only successful one.
Brother, I feel you, I hear you, but we addressing what you're saying now, brother.
I shouldn't even say nothing.
No, you said it, it's good. Yeah, and like I said, that brother's killing on our piece. We appreciate your piece. And this is a part that Chris and I was talking about last night. There's a difference between schooling and education. And a lot of times, those people conflate those things, but there's a lot of times you go through a full process of schooling and very little education happens in that building, but it happens outside of it, right? So we talked about that path. Listen, I went through high school and college and ended up getting a doctorate, and I would argue to say, like I would venture to say, like we said last night, it wasn't that I was actually getting a great education throughout that process, but I learned the process of schooling, and even though I graduated at the 383 or whatever I graduated with, I still didn't know a damn thing when I got to college. I found out that I was remedial in everything, but it was what I learned growing up in Chicago and in Oakland that was like, look, I seen hustlers, I seen how hustlers do it. Oh, I can do this school hustle thing and I can kind of keep going. But I got my education from other places. So as an administrator, as a teacher, from my barbershop, from my parents, from the people I saw on the corner, and also from the crackheads who helped me see what not to do. And so, like when we talk about these parents come into your school, the other thing you can do is give them game. How do I get the most out of this school experience? Even if the education ain't up to par, how do I make sure that kid's gonna be okay regardless of what your park scores are or whatever the case is? And how do we build strong black men that can resist and do what they need to do and like have a business of their own regardless of, because again, we are on our own. So how are you armoring the kids and the families that come into your space? You can play a role in that.
So I want a part of what he was saying though, right? Like, because there is a part of what he's saying is we all got to do our role, right? Like, this is a room full of educators, and as a parent activist and advocate, we can have a different conversation with the room full of parents, right? Like, and someone should. We should be having rooms of students and rooms of parents and rooms of teachers, and at some point they should be in the same room, right? Like all coming together. But it is a partnership of sorts. I was a terrible student. I was never a bad learner, right? I was always a learner. You couldn't stop me from learning. I was a terrible student, like did terrible. In school, I take responsibility for that, myself, because, I knew that I could learn. But what he is saying, there's an element that we don't ever want to hear in what he is saying. I think it's true. There is some responsibility outside of teachers, like for the care and love of our children.
Yeah, I don't think nobody disagrees with that.
No, but we don't talk about it enough. And I know the way that he just said it is passionate. It wasn't really a question, and we should have cut him off. And he shouldn't have said, I'm just an artist, because all revolution starts with art. Right? And our creators and the creative people in our communities make the world go round. So I just want to start say that. But they're embedded in his point is something we don't talk enough about.
So let's give this brother another shout out for having the courage. All right, we got one more question before we get ushered off the stage. I'm gonna take you.
We got two people.
Stand up, stand up.
I'm a Robert Academy. Hi, nice to meet you guys. Are awesome. I get water crazy. They know that. My big concern is this, and the question I have for you is, how do we make not only the community and the parents accountable? I mean, we get the position where we come into the school, you know, our hearts and soul is in it. Urban Academy is in it. And Cecil is definitely, you know, our gem. But what my concern is, like, how do we get them to be accountable as well? Everything is always thrown back on us. The finger's always pointed back at the teachers. We're not doing enough. Our planning isn't enough. We didn't take into consideration this. And we constantly keep changing and revamping and regrouping. But how do you make that determination? How do you make them accountable? How do you make them open their eyes?
This
So I was just gonna say, like,
Yeah,
all
so
about
the
the
light-
one is,
yeah.
the premise of this question,
Yeah.
could use some calibrating, right? Like it's the most Negro piano.
Well, I mean,
say, like, the
basically-
premise of this question
let me
needs
be- I was
a
here
little
for
help,
this.
right?
Yes,
Right.
and a lot of help.
Like, because you can't make people
Right.
accountable for something they're already accountable for. Schools don't have kids, parents have kids, right? So those kids go home to somebody every night. I worked in the welfare system for a decade, and in that time, in dealing with the schools, what I knew all the time was the school was clueless about what was on our side of the fence, right? I was working with the families, right? So when I worked with the social worker who's at the school, and they worked with me on the outside, we knew we were looking at the same elephant in the dark, like touching different parts of it. And this idea that people just aren't accountable and just don't care about their kids and just don't show up to nothing and whatnot, there's like 8 million stories that could go along with that, right? That can explain all of that. And none of it is helped by the institution itself having this idea around, like, we're always on the hook, no one else is on the hook, blah, blah, blah. So my easiest answer is to say change the frame of the question. And you might get different answers and there might be different outcomes. That does not mean there aren't going to be some people who still not going to show up on a Tuesday night during dinner time when there's no food,
But this is
daycare, childcare,
but there,
transportation,
I like,
blah, blah, blah.
I think you said it in a very nice way, and I think that, like, I mean, we're a podcast. This ain't a panel, and I think that, like,
Become open.
Absolutely. That's why I'm wearing this hot ass sweater in this 89-degree room. Wait, listen.
Wait. Before you say what you about to say, I want to put a slight disclaimer out there that he is speaking for himself.
I definitely am. I'm not speaking for nobody else on this panel. I think it's listening to the question. It was doing something to me. And every time I heard "make" from a white woman in a room that's supposed to be about black kids unapologetically, I got more and more angry. And not that you don't have a right to even ask that question, but it's indicative of what a lot of things that we're talking about, right? So I think I need the consciousness and awareness of, even in the room that you're in around blackness and black people, of how free you just felt to kind of say that in that type of way. But you still got an issue. You still got an issue that we're trying to get to, right? And so, like, I just want to be really, really clear about how we talk about our kids and who we kind of have in there. White folks don't have these conversations about white kids. It's a bunch of white kids with parents who ain't sitting down and doing homework with them, who ain't like showing up at the school every single week, and they don't get kind of this, they don't have to wear the stench that they don't care about their kids, or they're not showing up. Listen, man, my mom was on crack and getting clean. Like, she can't be at the school every single week. She's like, look, I get them clean and fed, I send them to you. I gotta go do a job, you need to go do a job. You know what I'm saying? But it's not the issue of, you can push parents and push kids. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like, look, I need him to do this, that, and the third. But when I have a mindset, when I kind of feel deep down in my gut that I don't know if you care, I don't think you care about your kid. Like, that's the narrative that comes up. And even if that wasn't what was meant by the question of the statement, I can't let that ride in a room that's supposed to be celebrating blackness, because I go to so many things that's for black people, and it's like a quarter of white folks that's in the thing. Like, our spaces is always popping. It's always popping. I'm not showing up at the white revolutionary thing. I lived in Kentucky. It was some meetings I couldn't go to. So I just wanted to kind of say it because I'm unapologetically black in this piece, and our kids are brilliant. But if you come in with that block already there, you never gonna crack into that bridge, because I can feel it. I got a lot of degrees. There's a lot of smart people on this. There's a lot of success here. But that instantly closed me off. I'm making a good salary. I get to fly all over the country, and you wouldn't even be able to teach me right now. So, I mean, I just think that how we showing up is
not
important.
ostracize the audience.
Well, and I want to be clear about this question too, because this is my role on the podcast, right? To come.
What is that exactly your role?
To come from the side. I would get the exact same question from black educators.
I hear you.
Right? I will be in rooms of black teachers and hear that exact same question. Mm-hmm. We have a class problem too. Let's not gloss over. Like,
so wait, you can be this question and then you attacking.
No. I just want to see. I just want to listen up because I love the black power.
It's layers though, man.
We got a class problem too. Like listen, like educated Negroes.
We gotta follow what you're not talking to the microphone.
Everybody. Okay, Oakland, East Coast, West Coast. You don't need to come to Minnesota to do a real nice podcast. But the point that I just want to raise is there's an institutional thing. Actually, I felt that the question is problematic, but it's not. I will hear the same question again in the near future in rooms full of black educators too, because we have a class problem. We have people who look at our kids not as family, as others too. It's weird. It's a weird thing to get. Like some of y'all, like there was what was it, Mr. Wendell? Years ago there was a song, Mr. Wendell, and he was talking about
I'm not doing this.
How some of y'all go to all these fancy big colleges and come back confused. Mr. Wendell, go on, Mr. Wendell. You don't know Mr. Wendell? You're not old enough, right? You're not old enough. You don't know Mr. Wendell?
You couldn't find a Wiz Khalifa song?
Who's that, bro? Does he rap?
But Chris, to answer your question, I would expect you to have the same response. I would expect if you felt that a black person was kind of doing that to our young people and saying it that way, I would hope that we would all also have the courage in that moment too to kind of say, it's the impetus on us to love our kids. But again, this goes back to what I was saying. Tell our parents the truth. Like, when you send your kids to these schools, like, everybody don't love your kid. It'll be nice, it's a nice to have, but I need you to be prepared as if nobody loves your kid. Then what? How are you moving?
All right, I want to add to this, because I didn't take offense to the statement that you asked, probably because I work in a building full of white women, and so I get it. So the question that I have for teachers is that if you're in a neighborhood and after 8 p.m. you don't want to go to that kid's house, then you probably should be in that neighborhood teaching. And then to second that, so our parents, right? Like, our parents are working 3 jobs to try to keep food on the table. So it's not like they don't want to be at the Meet the Teachers. They're at work, right? They want to make sure that their kids have food so they can send them to you. So I don't want to say that I don't want to make this to be like a victim blaming kind of thing, right? I want us to come up with a solution as to how to help our students, right? So I want you to reframe your question so that we can help you help our kids. Does that make sense? All right. So I don't want you to feel attacked. I don't want anybody in here.
I think I was laughing at the tech crack.
They're kicking us off?
Yeah.
So he's shaking his head like, yeah, we're kicking you off.
Thank you, State of Black Learning. That's been another episode.